And it gives them a foundation for negotiating for more money. Also negotiating for more PTO. It's negotiating for a better leave policy if you're about to have a child in some capacity. Whether you're a young professional still early on, or you're a C-suite executive, retiring but looking to do more board work, and everyone in between, every industry, there is a value that you bring to the table. There is a way that you have been successful and you have been a leader and you have made a difference. If your resume isn't updated, you're behind the ball.
Are you feeling vulnerable and worn out by the environment you find yourself in, whether that is your manager, the culture of your organization? You may be feeling some toxicity. And you're probably asking yourself, what's next? How do I get out of this? Well, whether you feel like your career is suboptimal right now or you hit a wall, all of the answers are inside this show. Hey, Emily, thank you for joining us today. How are you doing?
James, I'm doing so well. Thank you so much for having me. How are you?
I'm very well. Yeah, this is good. I'm super excited to help these people who've hit the wall, people who are feeling a little bit worn out by the environment they're in. That could be a manager. There could be maybe just some suboptimal stuff going on for them. They're not hitting the expectations they have for themselves. You are the queen of this stuff in your business, Refresh Your Step. Why don't we start there? Tell us a little bit about Refresh Your Step.
Yeah, absolutely. So Refresh Your Step is a boutique career advisory firm. We actually really marry the documents piece, the professional assets, resume, LinkedIn, bio, all of that, along with the actual career advisory. How are you stuck? What's going on? What wall have you hit? What are the challenges you're facing? And then how are you going to navigate a job search? What is your strategy? What is your network looking like? How are we going to deep dive into that network? How are we approaching interviews, applying, negotiations when we get to that piece, so on and so forth. So we're putting it all together to make sure people are on the right path and empowered to do so.
One thing I heard there was documentation. So what kind of documents might people be needing? What kind of documents are you the experts in? I see some of your content, not everybody else will, but I know that you've got a team of professional people who help with the document.
I'll take a step back here. I'm actually a triple certified master resume writer. I was the youngest globally to reach that level. And that was couple years back that I was the youngest globally to do so, but at the time. And so we are known for the resumes that we craft. They're very high level, they're very polished, very aligned with whatever that client is, and capturing their record of success, which we'll talk more about. We also will craft cover letters to go with that, or e-notes, or whatever the client needs. We also will craft LinkedIn content. So we want to craft their profiles, making sure that that is working in tandem with their resumes. Not duplicate content. LinkedIn is driven by algorithms. We do have to craft onto those algorithms, but anything that we craft, resume, LinkedIn, a bio, anything, it's going to have to reflect that person's record of success and ensure that it's positioning them based on what they're looking for next. So we do very much jump into that content. And I have a wonderful team of writers who are all highly certified, very good at what they do. And we work in team format with each and every client. So that client has a team of support around them as we're going through the process and beyond.
So what's the value of that? Because if I'm writing a resume today and I don't want to ask somebody to help me with it, I could probably create my resume. I'll stick it in ChatGPT, out another version. What do you think? What are you seeing as the uplift? If they work with you, what kind of results are people to expect versus creation of a resume? What are the downfalls of doing it by yourself versus having some experts like you,
Sure.
3 times?
Well, and there's a couple different things there. So first of all, doing it yourself tends to be very difficult, right? Because you are too into it and it's hard to think through what have I done and how have I done this? People don't even know that their documents should reflect their success almost universally throughout. They don't know that piece. Then it's so difficult to get out of your own head to do it. Also, writing resume content is very unique and unto itself. There's an art form to it where you're having to write tight, very direct. You're trying to capture a lot of information in a very succinct way and to make sure that it's polished, in addition to the format being effective for getting through the applicant tracking systems, the AI that's now used, as well as engaging to an actual person. Speaking about that AI, obviously that's been a topic of conversation in the last year or so.
Has it?
Just a little bit. I actually had a recruiter friend reach out to me recently about this, and she said, what do you make of these AI resume platforms? And I said, they do not get to know you as a person. And that's the real kicker, right? They might spit out something that kind of sounds okay, but they're not going to dig in deep about what has made individual pieces of your work so successful, nor are they really going to understand what's going on in your life and how we need to ensure that we are thinking through what have you done today? How are we positioning this as successful points? And what are you looking to do so everything is aligned? And that's where we come in. And we're also digging into the nitty gritty of what have been the major challenges that have popped up along the way? What's going on with your industry? What's going on with your team? How are you showing up? How are you not showing up? What are the obstacles that you need to tell us about that you don't want to come up randomly in an interview and not be prepared for? ChatGPT can't do that. But a person who's an industry professional, we can do that. And we do it all the time.
So then tell us about Uplift. You can prove you've got thousands of clients that you've worked with. What kind of opportunities do they get exposed to that they wouldn't if they didn't follow a process like the one you're using?
Sure.
And what about the reward? Because I think no matter what, we'd love to think that people weren't as attached to money as they are, but they are attached to that. So tell us a little bit about what kind of opportunities uncovered.
So,
what kind of financial gain is there?
Absolutely. So a few things there, and I'll get to the financial gain piece last because I think the other pieces play into it. Often what we hear at the end of the initial discussion, some version of, oh my God, I see the light. Like they have been stuck. They have been mired in whatever toxic situation they're in, whatever story they've been telling themselves that may or may not have a ton of truth to it, but they've been definitely telling themselves a story and they're lost in the dark. But once we talk to them and we start talking through and sort of peeling back these layers, they see a light. They see a chance to move forward. They see what they're reaching towards. They see that they have a strategy in front of them and support around them. And it gets them actually moving. It gets them working towards something with accountability, getting those documents done along the way, holding themselves accountable to building in their network, expanding their network, leveraging it so they're not just applying online, knowing how to approach interviews with strategies, not just memorize responses or jumping in with no plan whatsoever. And it gives them a foundation for negotiating for more money, which of course they all want. So it's the clients who start out this process saying, oh my God, I'm so stuck. I'm so scared. I feel so vulnerable. I don't know what's going on. Quickly being able to see a more positive place that they know they can now get to because they see the steps laid out, the support that they have, the outcomes along the way with the documents and the interview prep and the networking strategy. And then I always say, we're going to get to that point of negotiations and you're building up to that. Everything builds up to the negotiations, but the documents are part of building into those discussions, the interview prep, the networking pieces, all of it. So that when you get there, you've already laid that foundation for, manager who's looking to hire me, hiring manager, you already know my success in these areas. You have seen my pattern of excellence. You know I'm going to be an immediate value. We've discussed your challenges and how I can almost immediately help you start to solve those things. Let's talk about the compensation piece. And it just puts that individual in a much stronger place from which to negotiate towards the higher end of that range to get more of the benefits they're looking for, more of a sign-on bonus, whatever the case may be. So it starts still when they're stuck, but immediately starts to break away into, I'm seeing and embracing my record of success. I see how that's integrated into the documents, my networking, my interviews, so on.
Yeah, I do want to talk about a magic word you just said, so we'll dive into that in a second, but I want to give people an example. So give us, what would be kind of client average of maybe a pay raise that somebody get, a bump, whether they're moving internally or externally? And then what would be like a stellar client example? Maybe tell us one of your favorite client stories where this all went absolutely fantastic and this incredible result. So give us the average and then tell us, here's a really good example.
I mean, the average, I will say, I would love to say the average is, between $10,000 and $15,000 or whatever the case may be. It changes so much because we don't work within any one industry. Now, we do typically work with mid-levels, executives, and C-suite. We do have, especially this time of year, we have a lot more college grads because they're looking to figure out, or pending college grads. They're usually the kids of our former clients. But anyway, we're usually working with that mid-level and up, but across different industries. So what's going to happen in the marketing industry is very different than what's going to happen in healthcare. It's very different than what's going to happen in finance or law in terms of a bump up. But we do consistently see an increase. Especially in this down market, to still consistently see that, I think makes a big difference and says a lot about the process and the mindset shift that our clients experience. But it does vacillate just based on industry and what's going on within that any one industry, right? But the consistency of that compensation bump is there, as well as learning to recognize that there's more than just true take-home pay on a biweekly basis that's built into those benefits, right? That full compensation. So it's also negotiating for more PTO. It's negotiating for a better leave policy if you're about to have a child in some capacity, or whatever the case may be. A more flexible work schedule if you need it. So it's those elements as well that people are also learning to prioritize and work into their negotiation. I do have a number of these outstanding client negotiations. The one that comes to mind was not long ago, someone in finance up in New York. He was definitely underpaid in his earlier role. He was, a financial professional doing advisory and whatnot. And we went through the process. He knew he was being underpaid, but he had a tremendous track record of success. And so he went through the process, and we got the documents together. We advised him on how to approach his interviews and to also leverage his network more. And he sent me this message. I'll never forget it. He was like, I cannot believe I'm being brought on at a $50,000 pay increase. Wow. And he was just blown away. He was like, I cannot believe, and $50,000 is nothing to sneeze at, right? That's a significant jump. And he was just so amazed. And so, to this day, on LinkedIn and on other social media, somebody will say, I need a resume writer. I need it. And he's like, definitely Emily Cabot, the Refresher Step team. You will never believe what they did for me. And it's like, we facilitated, you did it for yourself. You had I didn't go into interview for you. We put together the resumes. We didn't go into interview for you. You just needed that mindset shift and to have that boost in, I can do this. I already have done this, and I'll continue doing it that much more.
That is a heartwarming story. And anyone watching, if you've got to this point, you don't need to watch the rest. You should head over to refreshyourstep.com and get yourself onto the website. Look at all the services there. Have a conversation with Emily and her team, and you're going to get some of these results for you. But if you're watching this and thinking, well, I don't know if this is for me, you did mention earlier about vulnerability. You actually mentioned the word vulnerable. And I want to dive in on that, because I know we talked before in the green room before we came on air here, that's a place that people turn up to you in, that they are vulnerable. They don't know the next step. They don't know who to work with. They don't know who to ask for help. And they're at their wits' end, that they're really struggling with the environment they find themselves in. Tell us about that. And maybe that's a segue into your unique proprietary process. Then you can tell us about that. But tell us about, I want you to talk to those people who are feeling something, and then we'll maybe talk a little bit about your process.
Every client who comes our way, almost uniformly, they come our way because they are feeling vulnerable, because they're scared, because they're in a situation where they feel like they can't move, and they are struggling to figure a way out of it. And they may have talked to some people in their network. They may have talked to some of their loved ones, a spouse, a best friend, whomever it might be, a mentor, but they're still hitting a wall, or their mentor or best friend or spouse or whomever said, you need to get some help. You cannot do this alone. And that's where we come in. We recognize that a crisis can hit anybody at any level, at any time, and in a myriad of situations. So whether it's the crisis of I don't like the path that I'm on, and I don't know where to go next, which was a foundational experience, not for me, but that I was seeing over and over again, that led me to start the business. But that crisis of happens a lot, and people stay so quiet because they feel like everyone around them is so successful, not realizing that everyone around them has already had this moment, is going through this moment, or will, right? Yeah. So they don't, it's that world of everybody else's life looks perfect, but mine is just not in a great place. And everybody's feeling that, right? So there's that crisis of There's that crisis of a whole team where they're dealing with a toxic manager or a whole department's being, reduced, a reduction in force. They're all being let go. It can be a whole company that has just been bought and they know there's going to be redundancies and they feel vulnerable. Like, am I keeping my job? A whole industry that's going through a massive shift. We're seeing that quite a bit across different industries right now. Or as we come up on the 4-year anniversary of COVID, a whole global impact, right? Which, knock wood, we don't see that again in our lifetimes. And so these crises show up in different forms. And it's the people who are realizing that they need help, that there is help out there to actually turn to, that trying to do it on your own is, admirable if that's what you want to do, but also it's just as admirable to reach out and find yourself a team of support, find yourself people who will objectively be there to help you navigate your way out. And this is an empowering process. That's the whole point.
Yeah,
It's taking you from a place of, I don't know what I want to do. I'm struggling. I'm hurting. I'm hitting a wall. I've put blinders on, to let's gently remove the blinders. Let's talk about what's going on. You are in a safe place to really discuss. I'm not HR. I'm not going to hold you, to your feet to the fire on any one thing. Let's talk through what's really happening. And I have to say all the time, I'm not a therapist. I don't play one on TV. Sometimes there are needs for therapy and I 100% support that, but let's talk through a strategic approach to taking your power back and to understanding the value that you bring so that it's in the documents and you can speak to it.
Yeah, that's an important distinction, in coaching and putting these frameworks and processes into people's careers. You're actually looking future forward. So you're forward pacing things. There is some review of the story they're telling themselves potentially, but we're not going to go a deep dive and take a look at that. So I think that's awesome. So shift that then to tell us a little bit about, you have a process kind of named after you, at least. Tell us a little bit. The Kapitalize process. I'd love to know. Oh, is it Kapitalize approach or process? Which one is it?
It's process. So it is the Kapitalize process. My last name is Capit with a K. So I love a good pun. And so this one it stood out. It made sense. But it might be named after me, but it really is for each individual client to learn how to capitalize upon themselves, to recognize their inherent value, the ways that they have been successful throughout their career to date, even, whether you're a young professional still early on, or you're a C-suite executive, retiring, but looking to do more board work, and everyone in between, every industry, there is a value that you bring to the table. There is a way that you have been successful and you have been a leader and you have made a difference in so many different capacities.
Can I ask you a question on that? So is that like an assessment or a series of questions that you ask so they can get to that? Because I find a lot of people actually are disassociated with their own achievement. How do you extract that?
So there's a few steps initially in the Kapitalize process. And so this does answer your question. First, we're going to talk to people about doing a theoretical job search. We want to know, theoretically, what do you want to do? Let's take the pressure off of you finding roles you're going to apply for, and instead think hypothetically, what roles check both boxes on, I would love to do this, and this makes sense for me, ideally, realistically. I want the Venn diagram middle part, right? Of these roles fit that middle part. I would love to do this, and it realistically makes sense. So when they take the pressure off of themselves, they're a lot more honest about what they want. And so when they start looking for these roles, and sometimes it shows up in our LinkedIn profiles of, I want to do what this guy does, or what she does is amazing. And I can totally see how my experience translates into that. So showing up in those ways, they are a lot more honest with themselves as well as with us. And then we're using that eventually to sort of cross, investigate the kind of keywords and whatnot we need to work in and whatnot. But it allows them to start opening their eyes to the possibilities that are, of course, realistic too. And then the second step in the process, we call a recommendation poll, a rec poll. Not yet totally getting to the achievements piece, but working up to it. A recommendation poll is starting to think through the network and what people have said about them. So it's either this existing, do you have performance reviews? Do you have email testimonials to your general greatness and when you launched something or you were part of something or you had an award? that you've kept track of, right? What kind of existing information can you send us? In addition to, let's think about recommendations that we need to source. We usually want those somewhere on LinkedIn. A lot of times people don't even know that's a thing, or they don't know what needs to be on there. But we start thinking through, if we need recommendations, and we typically do, who are we asking? Who's in your network? Who have you reported into that can talk about you and your great work? And from a managerial perspective, who have you worked with cross-functionally, internally and externally, who can also talk about you, but from a different perspective? Who have you managed either directly or indirectly, such as in projects, that can talk about your management style? And how are we going to reach out to those people? What are we going to ask them to say about us in a recommendation? What launching off points? We're not writing recs for them. We're giving them a launching off point, and then also offering to write a recommendation for them. So not only are we getting those recommendations in, and we will pull, as writers, we'll pull from those and integrate excerpts into the documents, but we're also getting clients to really be thinking more critically about their network and who they're going to then more mindfully reach out to as far as the actual networking piece for job searches. And we're working into that too. But as they're working through, who am I reaching out to? What do they know about me? What have been my success points? What do these performance reviews say? What are the awards that I have been tracking? That starts to build their confidence back up in, how have I been successful? So then we move on to the big piece, which is what we call the accomplishments and measurables matrix. And it is a worksheet. We have tons that we pull from that have been anonymized. We send as samples, but it allows them to start to put into a document at a very high level. And I'll touch on that in a minute. What did I do? How did I do it? What was the outcome? And the reason we want it high level is we're trying to, A, cut down the amount of time they need to spend on this because they're busy. We get it. But B, we're training them to be successful in interviews. People don't want to hear a 5-minute slog through whatever, this project was that you launched. They want to know, what'd you do? How'd you do it? What was the outcome? So we are having them capture this information in a snapshot form, partially for us, but also as they are preparing for these conversations. And I will say to clients, this is not going to be the most fun you've ever had. I get it. It is, however, going to prepare you to be that much more powerful and impactful in interviews. So they inevitably, I got one this morning actually from a client. It prepares them, and they come back to us and they say, oh my God, I see my value. I get it. I understand why you made me do this and how much more prepared I am to have these conversations, networking, interviews, negotiations, and so on and so forth. But we also will do a Kapitalize Process takeaway session where I'm going to look at that document. I have one of these coming up in an hour, actually. I'm going to look at that document and I'm going to come up with a string of questions to help that individual better assess what they're looking for next and how that's going to align their documents, their job search strategy, their interviews. Looking at your record of success, what have you enjoyed? What do you want to do more of? What are you fulfilled by? What do you never, ever, ever want to do again, even if you were successful at it? And again, this is putting them back in that driver's seat. It's allowing them to feel that they have a say in what they're doing, how they're showing up in documents, resume, LinkedIn, bio if they need it, how they're going to show up in interviews, what kind of jobs they're looking for, how much more prepared they are for negotiations. It starts to chip away that vulnerability and rebuild them from a place of strength. That's what we're aiming for. That's where we're having them capitalize upon themselves. So those are the three main pieces.
I think the process, to me, speaks that they could get in touch with the impact they've already made, the contribution they've been making, how they are already prepared. Most of the information is already available. So it's like you're not going to create anything new or have to innovate anything. You are already this wonderful career professional. And so we're just going to get you prepared to kind of navigate this process. And then I think I like that you have this, I always think about that as a kind of cake and ingredients to make a great cake. But your icing was all around feeling fulfilled and only working on things that you love to do or at least like to do. So when you're getting into these new roles, you're going to be spending most of the time doing stuff that suits your value and who you are as an individual. Yeah, it's wonderful. Okay, so where can we go? I wanted to talk to you about your book, but we'll get on to that. I just want to go back to something you said earlier, because maybe somebody's asking themselves an internal question watching. Hey, you talked about negotiation, but you didn't really tell us what are the steps. So talk us a little bit about how do you help with that negotiation process, and maybe what are one or two things that someone could be thinking about as they go into their own negotiation? Because you gave lots of examples, but yeah, tell us more.
First of all, negotiations start from the very beginning of each process, right? So you apply for a role. Negotiations start from the documents they see. Who are you? What are the value? Is there enough value that we see? Is there enough successful background history with you that we even want to bring you in for an interview? Okay, that continues in the interview. The interviews are a chance for people to better understand, how have you been successful? How can you be successful here? It is your chance as the candidate to be asking questions. This also plays into negotiations. What are the major challenges that you're looking for? What is the prioritization? What do you want to knock out first? What are we looking at 3 months down, 6 months down, 9 months down? What are the obstacles in the industry? Understanding and gathering intelligence on what they're looking for, so that you as the candidate can be hearing that, responding in ways that better align you with that role, that further better aligns you with the higher end of that compensation piece, right? So this is all playing into when they make the offer. Now, when they make the offer, a lot of times, most of the time, companies are going to try to lowball you a little bit because they want to know what they can get away with, right? And right now, we are in an employer market. It just is what it is. And even when it's an employee market and then tides shift, you still want to prepare yourself for having this conversation, right? So negotiations, the biggest piece of advice that I'm happy to give, free advice, right? It is coming from a place of we, okay? It's not me asking you for a favor to pay me what I'm worth. It's, you already know my value. You already know, because we've talked about how I'm going to be an immediate value add within this organization. What can we do to get this number up to X? And how can I, what questions can I answer to make sure that this happens? But what can we done? What can we do? What can be done to make sure that we get that number up tier? And when you put it from that perspective, what that employer, hiring manager, recruiter, HR person is hearing is, wow, they expect us to do this. Okay, got it. And they've given us every reason why we should do it. And so that coming from a place of we, and not asking for a favor, not positioning it as a yes, no, strengthened your stance. And knock wood, not too loud, the dog will bark, but knock wood, I've yet to hear of a time when a company did not come back with a higher amount.
And I kind of see that as post-pandemic healthy behavior of it's no longer pre-pandemic, everybody competing. It's really aggressive, competitive market. And now we're in this, we've moved from me to we. So I think that's a really good piece of advice.
And that's a silver lining of the pandemic, which again, 4 years in at this point, there were a number of silver linings that I think people are just starting to come around and see more and more. But the we perspective, I think, has really taken off. And it's been one that I think has, again, allowed people to feel empowered with taking the control back in their career.
So I do want to talk about your book and make sure we talk about that today, and maybe talk about the dog and introduce the dog in a moment, but we'll get to it. What was I thinking? Yeah, so I wanted to ask you about, what are the 3 mistakes that people make prior to engaging you? So they already thought they knew what they were going to do. So they went it alone. They made some assumptions. What kind of assumptions did they make that you have to kind of course correct?
In terms of what it is to work with us?
No, the mistakes they make in terms of maybe job searching, maybe talking to their boss, maybe having conversations with their company, whatever your examples may be. But I'm just not sure whoever's watching gets that. Don't do these things.
A lot of times when they're doing the job search, they are just doing the easy apply, and that's all they're doing. That's a massive mistake, right? Because if you're just doing an easy apply and you are told by your mom's gardener's son's, best friend's uncle who's in HR that you have to apply 50 times a day to get anywhere, no. Change your approach from a quantitative one to a qualitative one. It's a litmus test. Sure, you have to apply online because you want to get your name in the system, fine. Do you care enough to ensure that your documents get to a person? Meaning leverage your network. You've got to leverage your network. So mistake number one is just applying online and not leveraging your network. Mistake number two, I would say, is thinking that the resume that you've been updating for X number of years without understanding that whatever the Career Center told you 15, 20, 25 years ago is totally fine. It's not. No offense to career centers, maybe a little offense, but a lot of times they're quite outdated. And I always know when it's a career center resume because it's just the same. It's the same thing just been added to. No, you've got to understand what makes for a polished resume these days in terms of content and format, in addition to making sure that you are well prepared to discuss those things in conversation. The third thing I would say is not being proactive. All too often, people are genuinely not being very proactive. I want to make sure that people understand that if your resume isn't updated, you're behind the ball because you never know, first of all, what's going to happen in the industry. Second, what's going to happen within your company, even if you think you have a handle on it, you don't know. And third, what if someone comes to you with the most amazing job and they need the resume? And then you're like stuck trying to get your foothold here and you have no idea what you're doing, right? And you've got a million other things going on. Update your resume proactively, update your LinkedIn proactively. So if you haven't done it, you're behind.
So we've got 3 steps there. So stop applying online, just blindly, get your resume built to the right point, and then be proactive about all of the activities you need to get involved in. That's awesome. So tell us about the book. I know that it's upcoming and you're in the process of creating it, but I want people to hear that all the things, these strategies that we're talking about are going to be in that as a kind of, whether we call that a training manual or a guide. Tell us what's inside.
Yeah, so absolutely. So I have written a book that really encapsulates the Kapitalize process, but takes it from the perspective of understanding and working towards career resilience. Because everyone who comes to us is facing some sort of a crisis, like I mentioned earlier. And so it's called Sink or Swim, the life-changing strategies for career resilience. And it really does take that Kapitalize process and break it down. And what's really cool about the book is that it's actually going to be a book/workbook so that people can start working through these different strategies with the matrix to capture their accomplishments and measurables, to work through their recommendation poll and getting those things in order. What are the theoretical job search? Also network activation, deep dive, how to really approach some of these questions such as, tell me about yourself, or what are you looking for in a job, so on and so forth. So it's starting to come together. I have been working on it for a little bit longer than I would have intended. However, I also am a real person with a real life, raising 2 children and running a company and have my own clients and the team. And of course, this little one.
So tell us the name. So you have a 10-year-old and a 4-year-old, which we talked about. What's the name of the dog?
So this is Charlotte.
Hello, Charlotte. There we go. Wonderful. Charlotte likes the taste of Emily.
She does. You do. You're so sweet.
So listen, I want everybody to hear that. So I'm going to just interrupt a little moment. It's okay to get your results at the pace that's right for you, because you've got to play roles in your career and you're going to navigate all of these difficulties, and life is going to go on. And 15% of your life will be work. Everything else will be outside of that. So
exactly. Yeah. And I realize I realized this a long time ago. I can show up in my life in 3 different areas. And I remember being told this many years ago, and it's very true. I can run my business, which that's in, my own clients and the operations of the business and the team and all of that. I can show up as a wife and a mother, and those things are critically important to me. And I can show up for myself, taking care of my health, which I think is also very critically important. And the book is getting written, but I will not sacrifice my time with my children, or my clients, or running the business, or the very little time that I have to myself every day to work out and do the things for myself that I need to do. Because I've seen the burnout. I've seen the burnout way too many times. And as someone who tries to live that kind of balanced life, I work on it daily. I work on it when I can. Sometimes chapters get written at 6 a.m, not often enough. I would have loved to have done that this morning, but I didn't, because my son wanted to smuggle. It is what it is. But when the book is out, it'll be fantastic. And the process is there. We workshop the book all the time. The chapters are sent to clients all the time, and they love it. And so we're very excited. And I will say it was named for my father, who I named the book before he passed away, because he used to say, sitting around the dinner table, when we came home with some sort of challenge, I have 3 older brothers. When I came home with some sort of challenge, or one of my brothers did, he would look at us and he would say, you got to sink or swim. You got to figure it out. And if you figure it out, you'll be fine. So we're here to help you build towards that resilience.
Talk about that. You've got that tagline, the tag headline, the subheadline, and resilience is there. So tell us a little bit about what resilience means to you, and then why that's so important to the topics and the content that's inside the book.
To me, resilience is not just, showing up as Superman or She-Ra, for all of my 80s and 90s friends out there. But it's not like I can do this on my own. It's knowing that you have the strategies that you need to face this life and whatever professional challenges that you're facing, from a place of strength and support and feeling emboldened to move forward, right? Yeah. And so it's having those strategies in place, having that team of support that actually puts us in a place of power, right? And so taking that step back is one of the very first things we tell clients. Take a step back, be honest about what the challenges are, be honest about what the situation is. Let's also be honest about where you're coming from, what your success has been, and what you're looking to do next.
I think this is important, because the people who do go it alone, I may not want us to say this out loud, but you don't get paid as much as the people who've got a team around them.
Oh, so yeah.
You look at everybody who's wildly successful in their own careers. It's not just their talent, their gift, their skill, and their value, and the amount of effort they put in to get there. There's a team around those people, and it's much, much 100%. Bigger than you think. And so I think you're just drawing that point out, and for me, that's incredibly valuable. And so I thank you for sharing that one. Let's transition a little bit to, let's ask, what does the 10-year-old daughter think mom does?
The 10-year-old daughter she knows a little bit more. She knows that mom helps people with their careers. She does know. I think my 4-year-old son has absolutely no idea what I do, but the 10-year-old knows I help people with their careers.
And so is she aspiring to follow in your footsteps, or do you think she wants to be something else?
At the moment, she wants to be Taylor Swift, but I don't know many 10-year-olds who don't wish to also be Taylor Swift. I think she, more than anything, and this is what my husband and I try to impress upon both kids, but for my 10-year-old, her name is Hallie. For Hallie, I think she sees that mommy tries very hard and works with clients to understand their career aspirations and work towards those goals. We try to impress upon them, please do the same. Find whatever it is that speaks to you, that will fulfill you, that might evolve over time, but that you feel you can be the light for somebody else and also feel fulfilled by. And because she also tells me how much she wants to be a mommy 25 years down the road, that she has that chance for balance herself.
But I want to make sure people can come to you. I did mention your website earlier, but I want you to say it. And also, I do know that there's email contact on there, and they can actually click links and actually be in contact with you. Where do you want them to go? What's the name of the website?
Refreshyourstep.com, refreshyourstep.com. Some people think it's plural. It's not. But refreshyourstep.com. Check us out there. You can email me directly, Emily@refreshyourstep.com. You can find me on LinkedIn. I'm the only Emily Kapit, Kapit. So you find me there, and set up some time to chat. Always love to have conversations. Typically that initial consultation is going to be with myself or with one of my team members. We'll take you through that initial process. What we want to understand is, what's going on with you? What's the challenge? What are you focusing on? What do you think is the anticipated challenge? Let's talk. And then we'll
I think it's worth saying that you serve the whole market. Yes, there's conversations going on with director and above C-suite executives. But you're serving graduates, and you talked a little bit people at the beginning of their careers. So you have packages and services for everyone. And I know that you have a big team, and you love those dearly. We talked about those people too. So thank you, Emily. I know this conversation is going to hit the mark with a few people who did hit that wall. And I was that person once, more than once in my career, hitting a wall, not knowing what to do, not knowing where to turn to. And I wish I had access to services like this in those moments. And luckily through mentors, another way, I always found my way, but yeah, not knowing where to go is vital. So now they've got a resource, and that is you. So thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you so much for having me. Really appreciate it.
Hey, James, jumping in at the end here. I want to make sure that you enjoyed that video. And if you did, I would be delighted if you come and join me in this next video right here. So when you get there, we're going to teach you some more tools, strategies, methodologies that are going to change the way that you operate inside of your career. I'll see you inside.